Lila had always been a quiet, introspective girl. Her life was a careful blend of school, studying, and the quiet ache of memories that lingered from the time her mother had passed away. It had been a year now, but it felt like only yesterday when she lost the one person who had meant everything to her. Her mother had been her anchor, her rock, and now she was gone, leaving an empty space that no one could ever fill. The only thing that remained, the only connection she had left, was the silver necklace her mother had given her on the eve of her death. It was a simple piece, delicate and understated, yet it carried with it more weight than anything in Lila's world. The pendant was engraved with the words, "Always with you," a promise from her mother, a promise that resonated deeply in Lila's heart. Her mother had placed it around Lila's neck the night before she passed, her hands trembling but her voice steady as she whispered, "No matter where I am, I'll always be with you." Lila had been just 15 at the time, too young to understand the full depth of the loss, but now, a year later, those words felt like the only lifeline she had to a world she no longer understood. The necklace had become a part of her. It was the one thing that comforted her during sleepless nights, the thing that kept her from feeling completely lost in the vast emptiness of the world. Even when the weight of her grief pressed her down like a physical burden, she wore the necklace. It was the only thing that made her feel connected to her mother, to the love they had shared. But in high school, things were different. In a world filled with noise and expectations, Lila's quiet, thoughtful demeanor made her an easy target. She wasn't like the other girls who giggled in cliques or showed off their latest outfits. She wasn't loud or brash or eager to impress anyone. She wasn't anything like Sarah, Jessica, or Mark, the trio that made her life a living nightmare. They made a habit of picking on Lila, following her through the hallways, laughing behind her back, and whispering insults just loud enough for her to hear. At first, Lila tried to ignore them, hoping they would eventually lose interest and find someone else to torment. But the bullying never stopped. It only grew more inventive, more hurtful. The worst of it came in gym class, when the teasing escalated from whispers to open mockery. Lila had always been self-conscious about her athletic ability. She wasn't a natural when it came to sports, and while she was in good shape, she didn't have the same grace or coordination as the other girls. But gym class had become a battleground where Sarah, Jessica, and Mark took every opportunity to belittle her. They laughed at her, called her names, and made snide comments about how she looked in her gym clothes. It was as if they could smell her vulnerability, and they preyed upon it every chance they got. One afternoon after gym class, Lila made her way to the locker room, hoping to escape the chaos of the gym. The room was noisy with the sound of other girls chatting and changing, but it felt safe compared to the harsh reality of the gymnasium. She was just about to step into the shower when Sarah's voice sliced through the noise, loud and unmistakable. "Hey, look at this." Sarah's hand reached out, and before Lila could even react, the cold fingers of her tormentor snatched the necklace from her neck. Lila's heart skipped a beat as the pendant was yanked away from her skin. The necklace that her mother had given her, the one thing that held so much significance, was now in Sarah's hands. "What's this?" Sarah sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "A cheap necklace from your dead mom?" She held it up in front of her friends, waving it mockingly in the air as if it were nothing more than a piece of trash. Lila's breath caught in her throat, and her hands instinctively reached out for the necklace. But Sarah pulled it higher, just out of her grasp. "Give it back," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of her racing heart. Jessica, who had been standing nearby, joined in with a cruel laugh. "You really need to get over her, Lila. She's gone. All that's left of her is this thing. It's just a piece of metal. Doesn't mean anything." Her words felt like a slap in the face. Lila's chest tightened, her hands trembling. She could feel the tears threatening to spill, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. The necklace was the last part of her mother she had left, and to hear them belittle it like that was unbearable. "Give it back," Lila said, her voice steadier now, though her hands still shook. She tried again to reach for the necklace, but Sarah pulled it further out of her reach, laughing with Jessica and Mark at her expense. Lila's mind raced. She was desperate, terrified of losing the one piece of her mother's love that she had left. But what could she do? How could she fight back against this? They were stronger than her, bigger than her, and no matter how hard she tried, they always found a way to make her feel small. And then, as Sarah twisted the necklace in her hands, something inside Lila shifted. The feeling of helplessness, of being at the mercy of these bullies, suddenly gave way to something else, something stronger. A calmness, a resolve. This was more than just a necklace. This was about respect. This was about honoring the memory of her mother. This was a line they had crossed that she could no longer ignore. Lila's hands shook with anger, but her heart was steady. The warmth of her mother's love, the strength she had always shown Lila, surged through her like a current. Without thinking, she lunged forward, her fingers closing around the pendant just as it was about to fall. But before she could pull it back to her chest, Sarah and Mark seized her, grabbing her arms and pulling her to the floor. The cold tiles of the locker room pressed against her cheek as she struggled beneath their grip, but her eyes never left the necklace. It was all that mattered now. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, telling her she was stronger than she thought, that she could survive anything. Her hands, still shaking, closed around the necklace once more. But this time, she didn't just want it back. This time, she would do whatever it took to protect it. And deep down, Lila knew this wasn't the end. Lila had always kept her martial arts training a secret. It wasn't because she was ashamed of it, far from it. It was because, to her, fighting wasn't a game or something to show off. It was a personal discipline, a bond she had shared with her mother, something that transcended physical combat. Her mother had introduced her to karate when she was just 8 years old, and together they spent hours in the dojo, practicing moves, perfecting form, and learning the art of control. The dojo had been a sanctuary, a place where Lila found focus and peace in a world that often felt chaotic. When Lila earned her black belt at the age of 14, her mother had been so proud of her. It wasn't just a piece of fabric and thread. It symbolized years of hard work, dedication, and most importantly, self-discipline. It's not about fighting others, Lila, her mother had told her. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Those words had stuck with her through everything. Martial arts had never been about proving something to anyone else. It had been about inner strength, control, and balance. But in that moment, as Sarah, Jessica, and Mark humiliated her and ripped away the last piece of her mother she had left, Lila realized that all the control in the world would not stop the storm that was rising inside her. It wasn't just about the necklace, it was about her. It was about standing up for herself and reclaiming something that had been taken from her, not by force, but by ridicule. She couldn't walk away from this. She had to act for her mother's sake, for her own sake. The moment Sarah snatched the necklace from her neck and taunted her with it, Lila felt a shift. Her breath quickened, her body tensed. And for the first time in ages, she didn't feel weak or helpless. Instead, something inside her clicked. Without thinking, without hesitation, Lila tapped into the training that had been drilled into her for years. In one smooth, fluid motion, Lila spun on her heels, her body moving with the precision of a trained fighter. She had been in plenty of sparring matches in the dojo, but this felt different. This wasn't practice. This wasn't a friendly competition. This was real. Sarah, still holding the necklace, barely had time to react before Lila's leg swept across the floor, knocking her off balance. Sarah let out a surprised scream as she crumpled to the ground, her body crashing against the cold tiles with a loud thud. The room fell silent. Mark, always the one to jump in when his friends were in trouble, rushed at Lila. His hands were raised, ready to strike, but Lila had seen this before. She had faced opponents who made the same moves, anticipating every step, every attack. With a calmness she didn't even know she had, Lila ducked under his swing, her body flowing like water as she moved with purpose. As Mark's momentum carried him forward, Lila used his weight against him, shifting her center of gravity and flipping him over her shoulder. He crashed to the ground with a sharp grunt, the air knocked from his lungs. He groaned, stunned, his body twitching as he struggled to push himself up, but he couldn't get his bearings fast enough. Jessica, who had stood frozen at the sidelines, now looked at Lila in wide-eyed disbelief. She took a step back, her voice faltering. What are you doing?" she stammered, her confidence evaporating in an instant. Lila stood over the two of them, her breath coming in steady, controlled bursts. Her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no fear now. There was only clarity. The world seemed to fade away as her eyes locked onto Sarah, Jessica, and Mark. The fight wasn't about power. It was about standing her ground, about saying enough was enough. She wasn't the quiet, fragile girl they thought they could push around anymore. No, she was someone who knew what it meant to fight, for what mattered. "You've crossed the line," Lila said, her voice steady but low, carrying the weight of the promise she was making. She held the necklace tightly in her hand, the pendant cool against her palm. "No one messes with my mom's memory. No one." The words were simple, but they cut deep. It wasn't just about this moment, about the bullies in front of her. It was about everything she had endured, about the pain she had carried in silence for so long. Before Sarah, Jessica, or Mark could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of gym class. The door swung open, and teachers rushed in, drawn by the commotion. Sarah, Jessica, and Mark scrambled to their feet, but Lila didn't wait. She didn't want to see the shock and confusion on their faces anymore. She didn't need to. With the necklace clutched tightly in her hand, Lila turned and walked toward the door. Her heart was still racing, but there was a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. She could hear the voices of the teachers behind her, but she didn't stop. She didn't look back. As she walked down the hallway, Lila glanced down at the silver pendant resting in her hand. The weight of it, once so heavy with grief, now felt different. It was no longer just a symbol of loss. It was a symbol of her strength, of her ability to protect herself, and of her refusal to let anyone take away the love her mother had given her. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lila felt something close to peace. She had faced down her fear, her vulnerability, and her pain, and she had won. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, "You are stronger than you think." It was a phrase Lila had heard countless times, but today, she truly understood its meaning. The fight wasn't over. There would be other challenges, other battles, but Lila knew now that she was stronger than any of them. And with that knowledge came a sense of freedom, a sense of purpose. Today, she hadn't just fought for her mother's memory. She had fought for herself, and that made all the difference. As Lila stepped into the cool air outside, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't just the weight of the necklace in her hand. It was the weight of the past year, the pain, the grief, the fear. It was all starting to fade. And for the first time in a long time, Lila felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be.